Here is the properly formatted text with corrected punctuation and paragraph structure. Seniors, have you tried creams, oils, or treatments and still your skin continues losing firmness day after day? Discover these 3 vitamins that firm the skin and activate collagen production naturally. Well, let's begin with a vitamin that you have probably consumed for years without imagining everything it can do for your skin. I'm talking about vitamin C. And here is something that surprises many people. When they hear vitamin C, they immediately think of colds, immune defenses, or orange juice. But very few people relate it to something that worries millions of older adults: wrinkles, sagging skin, and loss of firmness. However, there is a reason why this vitamin continues to be one of the most studied when talking about healthy aging. It turns out that your body needs vitamin C to properly produce collagen. And this is more important than it seems because collagen is, to a large extent, what helps the skin maintain its structure. It is like that internal support that keeps the skin firmer, more resistant, and with better elasticity. The problem is that, as the years go by, that support begins to weaken, and collagen production decreases considerably. You may have even noticed it when looking at yourself in the mirror. There are areas of the face that simply no longer look the same as before. That is why vitamin C generates so much interest, because it helps the body in the formation of new collagen fibers, and at the same time helps protect the ones it already has. But that is not all. There is another aspect of aging that almost nobody mentions. Every day, without you noticing, your skin faces a real battle. Sun exposure, pollution, stress, smoke, and even some everyday habits generate molecules called free radicals. And these molecules can accelerate skin aging much more than most people imagine. And this is exactly where vitamin C stands out again. It helps create the necessary conditions for the skin to remain healthier, stronger, and better protected. And there is still something more. Vitamin C also participates in the skin's natural repair processes. Now, you are probably wondering where to find it. And yes, orange is an excellent source, but interestingly, it is not the only one, nor the richest in vitamin C. Fruits such as guava, kiwi, strawberries, papaya, mango, pineapple, tangerines, and citrus fruits in general contain very interesting amounts of this vitamin. And if we talk about vegetables, red bell pepper, broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, fresh parsley, and spinach also stand out for their contribution. In fact, a single guava can provide more vitamin C than several oranges combined. Something that usually surprises those who always thought orange was the absolute queen of this vitamin. That is why regularly including some of these foods in your diet can be a simple way to give your body the nutrients it needs to keep caring for the skin from within. Write the word vitamin in the comments if you want firmer and more radiant skin. Well, the next vitamin usually goes completely unnoticed when we talk about wrinkles and skin aging: vitamin D3. In fact, if you ask most people what vitamin D3 is for, they will probably tell you it is important for bones. And they are right. But what almost nobody knows is that it can also influence the way our skin ages over the years. And this is especially important after 60, because there is something that happens silently as we age. Our skin no longer renews itself as easily as when we were young. Before, the body constantly replaced old cells with new ones very efficiently. But over the years, that process begins to slow down. And even if you do not notice it from one day to the next, the effects eventually appear in the mirror. The skin can look duller, less luminous, rougher to the touch, and with a more tired appearance. And this is where vitamin D3 starts to draw attention because it participates in various processes related to cell renewal, something especially important when the body no longer works at the same speed as before. Now, there is another detail that many people do not know. When we talk about healthy skin, not everything depends on collagen. There is also something called the skin barrier. And although the name sounds complicated, the idea is very simple. Imagine it as a kind of natural shield that protects your skin every day. That shield helps keep moisture inside the skin and prevents external factors from damaging it so easily. When that barrier is in good condition, the skin usually looks softer, more flexible, and healthier. But when it starts to weaken, one of the most common problems in older adults appears: dryness. And you have probably already noticed it. Many people reach a certain age and feel that no matter how many creams they use, the skin still looks dry, dull, or lifeless. Well, maintaining adequate levels of vitamin D3 seems to be related to better functioning of this protective barrier, and that can help the skin retain better the moisture it needs to look healthy. But here comes the part that usually surprises people. Many older adults have low levels of vitamin D without knowing it, and little by little, the levels of this vitamin can decrease without any obvious signs at the beginning. That is why, when someone notices that their skin is drier, duller, or no longer has the same appearance as before, they rarely think that a vitamin D deficiency could be contributing to the problem. I am not saying it is the only cause, but it can be an important piece of a much larger puzzle. Now then, where can we get vitamin D3? The main source is still moderate sun exposure. In addition, it can also be found in foods such as salmon, sardines, tuna, egg yolk, liver, and some fortified products. And although this vitamin will not remove wrinkles overnight, it can help the body maintain fundamental processes so that the skin preserves a healthier appearance over the years. Before continuing with the third vitamin, subscribe to the channel to soften your wrinkles with my next videos. Well, and now we come to a vitamin that almost nobody talks about when it comes to wrinkles, sagging skin, and skin aging. Vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 is usually associated with bone health in the cardiovascular system. However, what is interesting is that its functions within the body go far beyond that. This vitamin participates in mechanisms that help the body maintain better balance in different tissues of the body. And although many people have never heard this, some researchers believe that this role could have important implications when we talk about healthy aging. In fact, some studies suggest that vitamin K2 could indirectly contribute to preserving certain structures related to tissue elasticity and firmness. And when we talk about mature skin, any factor that helps preserve these characteristics deserves attention, because in the end, firm skin does not depend solely on collagen. It also depends on the entire environment that supports that skin continuing to function in the best possible way over the years. That is why vitamin K2 has started to attract more and more interest. And perhaps the most surprising thing is that for a long time, it went almost unnoticed. While other vitamins took all the headlines, vitamin K2 remained in the background. However, today, many specialists consider it could be one of those missing pieces in the healthy aging puzzle. Now then, where can we find it? The best known sources of vitamin K2 include foods such as natto, a traditional Japanese food made from fermented soybeans, some aged cheeses, egg yolk, liver, grass-fed butter, and certain fermented products. And although it does not usually receive the same attention as other more popular vitamins, more and more people are beginning to take interest in it. There is something I constantly see in older people who try to take care of their skin, and it is the belief that at a certain age, vitamins no longer make any difference. But here is where many people make an important mistake. Because accepting that aging is natural does not mean resigning yourself to neglecting the body. It does not mean assuming that everything is lost. And it does not mean that the body stops needing important nutrients. In fact, the opposite happens. As the years go by, the body depends even more on adequate vitamins and minerals to continue carrying out many of its normal processes. Because with aging, numerous functions begin to become less efficient. Collagen production decreases. Cell renewal becomes slower. The skin loses part of its ability to retain moisture. And natural repair mechanisms no longer work at the same speed as during youth. For that reason, providing the body with the nutrients it needs remains important at any age. It could even be said that it becomes more important than ever. That is why it is so important not to fall into the idea that after 60, it is already too late to take care of the skin from within. Another very common mistake has to do with diet, and this one often goes completely unnoticed. As time passes, many people end up getting used to eating practically the same thing every day. They eat the same breakfast, they eat the same lunch, they eat the same dinner. And although that may seem unimportant, it can cause the body to receive less variety of nutrients than it actually needs. Because the body does not only need calories, it needs vitamins, it needs minerals, it needs antioxidants. It needs compounds that participate in hundreds of biological processes that happen every day without us even realizing it. Sometimes someone consumes very little fruit, very few vegetables, or almost no foods rich in essential vitamins, and then wonders why the skin no longer looks the same as before. And although age plays a role, nutrition also plays a much more important role than many people imagine. There's also something I find interesting to mention. For a long time, so much was said about the risks of the sun that some people began to avoid it almost completely. And it is understandable. We have all heard warnings about premature aging, spots, or damage caused by excessive exposure. However, something curious sometimes happens. In the attempt to avoid one extreme, some people end up falling into another. And although protecting the skin from excessive radiation is important, spending entire months practically without receiving sunlight is not usually the best strategy either, because vitamin D depends largely on that moderate sun exposure. And as we age, the body's ability to produce this vitamin is no longer the same as before. That is why, when sun exposure is practically non-existent for long periods, vitamin D levels can slowly decrease without the person noticing it. And when the levels of this vitamin decrease over long periods, the body may begin to notice its effects in different aspects of health. Another detail that tends to draw attention is the enormous obsession with collagen. Today, many people look for collagen supplements expecting extraordinary results, but they rarely ask themselves whether they are getting the vitamins that participate in the processes related to its production and maintenance. And this is something that few people consider. It is like trying to build a house by paying attention only to the bricks and forgetting all the other tools needed to raise the structure. You can have the bricks, but if other important pieces are missing, the construction will not progress as it should. Something similar happens with the skin. It is not only about one substance or a single nutrient. It is about the complete system working in harmony. And speaking of things that often go unnoticed, there is something that happens very frequently: silent deficiencies. Because a person can feel relatively well, live their normal life, and still have low levels of certain vitamins without suspecting it. And that is precisely what makes them so deceptive. They do not always produce clear signals. They do not always cause obvious symptoms. Sometimes it takes years before someone discovers that a deficiency existed. This happens especially with vitamin D. Many people discover years later that they had been living with insufficient levels for a long time and never imagined it. And that is exactly what makes this problem so common. Because when we think about a nutritional deficiency, we usually imagine obvious symptoms, clear signs, or drastic changes that immediately alert us. But reality does not always work that way. In many cases, deficiencies develop slowly and silently. So slowly that the person becomes used to them without realizing it. Because they continue doing their normal activities. They continue with their usual routine. They get up every morning, do their daily tasks, take care of their family, go shopping, or carry out their activities as always. And precisely because of that, they never suspected that something might be missing. And they never thought they might be needing more of this vitamin. Because the body is extraordinarily adaptable, many times it finds ways to keep functioning even when it does not receive everything it needs. But that does not mean it is functioning optimally. And here is where a detail often goes unnoticed. The body always prioritizes. When certain nutrients begin to become scarce, the body directs the available resources toward the most essential functions for survival. That is why some consequences can take a long time to become evident. They do not appear overnight. They accumulate little by little, month after month, year after year, until they finally begin to manifest in different areas of the body. And although many people associate this problem only with energy or overall health, the skin can also be affected by these processes. Because the skin is one of the most active tissues in the body, it is constantly renewing itself. It is constantly repairing itself. And to do so, it needs a continuous supply of adequate nutrients. That is why it is so important to understand something that many people overlook, and perhaps the most curious mistake of all is thinking that all vitamins are practically the same, as if any vitamin could do exactly the same job as another. But the reality is very different. Each one performs different functions. Each one participates in specific processes. And that is precisely why none of them should be considered a perfect substitute for another. That is why every time you hear about a specific vitamin, it is not simply a trend or a passing fad, nor is it about looking for a miracle solution. It is about understanding something much more important, that the body works thanks to a set of nutrients that work as a team. And the more we learn about the body, the more evident this reality becomes. Virtually no important process depends on a single nutrient. Most require the participation of multiple vitamins, minerals, proteins, and other compounds that work together. Share this video with friends and family who want to firm their skin. Discover the mixture of petroleum jelly with a specific oil that removes wrinkles. Click here. See you in the next video.